Tonight on Inventing the Future, we're taking a look at the white-hot field of synthetic biology with genomic futurist Andrew Hessel and Dr. William Hurlbut. Stay tuned to see what's next after what's next.
$100,000 BC, stone tools. 4,000 BC, the wheel. 9th century AD, gunpowder. 19th century, Eureka, the light bulb. 20th century, the automobile, television, nuclear weapons.
We choose to go to the moon in this decade and do the other thing. Not because they are easy, but because they are hard.
The future doesn't belong to the faint-hearted. It belongs to the brave.
Everything around you that you call life was made up by people that were no smarter than you. And you can change it. You can influence it. You can build your own things that other people can use.
People want their technology to have a sense of humanity. They want it to understand me, you specifically.
We have 3 billion new minds coming online to work with us to solve the grand challenges. The rate at which the technology is getting faster is itself getting faster, to a point that we have the potential to create a world of abundance.
The Live Lab Network presents Inventing the Future with Robert Tersick.
Hi, good evening. Thank you. Are you ready for some adventures in synthetic biology? This image behind me is from a comic book that they developed, a working group at MIT University developed to popularize the notion of synthetic biology, to get teenagers interested in synthetic biology. And as it turns out, kids aren't waiting until college now to start to do experiments and start to do lab work in biology. They're actually doing it at home. They're doing it today in their houses, in their dens, in their closets even. And it's not just limited to kids, it's actually open to everybody. We've reached this interesting phase now in society where we have citizen scientists. These are people who have access to labs and they're actually conducting science on their own. They're learning about it firsthand. They're conducting experiments. And with the field of synthetic biology, which we're going to get into in a great deal of detail in just a minute, you're going to learn some amazing stuff. This is absolutely at the forefront, the cutting edge of science right now. It's not your grandfather's genetic engineering in the sense of taking 2 genes and splicing them together. This is a radically new notion. People are actually composing life. What they're doing is they're writing DNA, and they're writing it the same way that a software developer would write code for a computer. Except in this case, they're writing DNA that's then put into a living thing and can replicate. And some of the breakthroughs are quite amazing. So there's already a drug that's been introduced into the market through synthetic biology, and it has the ability to reach up to 500 million people who are currently suffering from malaria. There are many other breakthroughs as well. We have bacteria that can eat up toxic waste and algae that produce diesel fuel. Some scientists are already speculating about the future, and some of the things they're talking about are incredible. Some of them are Hollywood fantasies. There's a scientist who's speculating about bringing back extinct species like the woolly mammoth or the Neanderthal. And so tonight we'll get into some more of these fantasies and some of the reality of what's happening right now. What I want to do is introduce our first guest, who's a friend of mine. He's at the very forefront of both citizen science and synthetic biology. Please join me in welcoming Andrew Hessel. Andrew, come on stage. Thank you. Great to see you here. Hi, and welcome. Ooh, thank you. Trick each other. So welcome to Chicago, where it's freezing cold. You just joined Autodesk, and I want to hear all about this. So tell me what your new title is.
My title is Distinguished Research Scientist with the Bio-Nano Programmable Matter Group at Autodesk.
That's a mouthful.
It is. It's a conversation starter.
Can you tell us what that means in plain English?
Really, the short story is we're working now to envision what the software design tools might be like for really small and potentially living things.
Autodesk is a company that we tend to think of as a company that's doing 3D technology for architects, designers, and also 3D technology for like computer graphics and special effects for movies. So how is Autodesk getting into like designing microbes? Is that what you're doing?
Well, really, we make software design tools, and software doesn't care about the scale of matter. We need tools for being able to understand, visualize, simulate at really all scales, whether it's a building or whether it's a microbe.
Okay, so in one respect, what you're doing is going to help this citizen science movement because you're building tools that are going to make it much easier for people to compose new life on a computer and visualize what that might be. Is that right?
Yeah, it's all digital design these days.
Wow, cool. I think you brought some pictures for us to share to talk about what's coming next here. Why don't you do that?
Yeah, happy to do that. So really, what I like to point out is I look at this as the new IT industry, and really the first IT industry started with this device, like the first transistor, and this made computers accessible to certain groups of people, largely large organizations. The microchip revolutionized the economics of computing, though. This happened in the early 1970s, and of course we know what happened after that. We started getting incredible new diversity and developers coming into the field, and really working out of garages sometime. And it became commoditized. Everyone could afford computing in just a few years. This was really big steps.
So the analogy you're making is that this is basically, the stage we're at with synthetic biology is the same stage that we were with personal computers back in the late 70s.
Absolutely.
Where people were, it was like homebrew computer club. People were building their own computers in their garages or their dens. Kind of like the labs that I was talking about a minute ago.
Exactly, except now we're working with a different type of computer, really bacteria. They're like information processors that do chemicals, but they're different. They're programmable, but the cool thing is they also make more of themselves. So they're like computers that can reproduce. This is pretty powerful.
That's amazing.
And if you look at a bacterial genome, it has about 5 megabits of information. Really, a small photograph. But this is enough to program a living thing. And really, if you've got a software program, you have to learn the basics. You have to learn how to read it, you have to learn how to write it. Right. We've been sequencing with devices like this. This is a desktop, it's about the size of a laser printer, but it can do a whole human genome, and reading it, we're starting to comprehend more and more of the basic tools of life, this is a simulator for the first bacterial cell. It's actually
what's
really
going
cool.
on? What is this
We're
a picture of?
actually modeling all the chemical processes that happen in a single bacterium and understanding what's going on below the hood.
So this is a computer model of a cell.
Computer model of a living cell.
Wow, that's incredible.
It's the first time we've ever done this. This was published by Stanford this last summer. And really what we're doing now is we're starting to learn how to write code.
Thanks.
We started writing genetic code back in the 1970s using something called recombinant DNA technologies. It was cutting and splicing genetic code. And really, if you take a look at it, you end up kind of writing ransom note style. You can write anything, but it takes a long time to do. The shift with synthetic biology, and what makes it so powerful, is now we can actually use computer software. We don't need a lab anymore. We don't need these tools, which are really restrictive. We can start using laptops.
So they virtualized the lab.
Yes, essentially now we have word processors for DNA. And the cool thing is we have printers. Companies like DNA 2.0, and there's a bunch of other ones, will print out your DNA, kind of like a Kinko's used to, prints out color copies.
So the analogy to computers is actually total.
It's really close.
So the idea, in the 80s when personal computers got good, we went from desktop, word composition to desktop publishing, and that was a big change in the print business.
Now we're getting desktop biotech. And so it's push-button DNA, and this is...
So you can compose DNA using a browser.
You can compose DNA using a browser.
You hit a button and send it.
They'll send it off to you.
That's awesome.
And this is opening up biotechnology to a whole new generation of people that are younger and know how to work with computers in the same way that 30 years ago kids started playing with personal computers.
And this is a big part of what you're doing. When I first met you, we were in Silicon Valley, and you were telling me that you've been working with high school kids and even grade school kids to try to get them to learn about synthetic biology, to maybe give them the confidence to play with it and experiment.
Yeah, I want them to realize this is potentially going to be a field that they will work in for the rest of their life if they start getting interested in it.
And how's that going? I mean, do kids respond to this stuff?
It's going really well. Really, some students naturally pick this up and they love working with it. And
so they don't see a big barrier. The way, I think when I was a kid, biology was for geeks. It was a challenge. You had to go, had to wear a lab coat, and you had to schedule time, and there were beakers involved and so on.
Yeah, it was more sciencey back then. Now it's more of an information science.
That's cool. And then do they use these things, like when you work with kids, do they use genome compiler to go like print out their organism or their DNA that they develop?
They certainly use these types of software tools and these DNA printers routinely now.
That's kind of cool.
Yeah, it's really sharp.
Take us a little bit into the future. So tell us what's coming next then with this.
Well, really what's been happening is we're starting to move into modularizing this type of genetic code, making it easier to assemble and to put together faster and cheaper. It's kind of like Lego bricks. It's really extensible. And the groups that's driving this forward is out of MIT. It's called International Genetically Engineered Machines. And it's really it's really the best student program for learning how to do synthetic biology.
Hang on a sec. So it's genetically engineered machines. So they're thinking about life as a kind of like a robot or a machine that you can control.
Yeah, we look at simple bacteria as really being little robots that are programmable.
Do you have examples of that? I mean, have they really built some of these machines?
Absolutely. And this picture shows the 2012 leaders in the field. This is the World Championships. There were over 2,500 students from 200 schools that participated this year. These were the best. The types of projects that I really liked showing people, though, this was actually from a few years ago. It was some students at Cambridge University, and they were making super bright glowing bacteria in all different colors. And what they ultimately want to do is to make glowing trees so we don't need street lights anymore. I think
incredible.
That's really a cool idea.
So those are the glowing trees in the background you can see.
Exactly.
That's a cool idea. What else have you got?
Well, this was the one that won the grand prize this year, and it was a group out of the Netherlands, and what they made was a bacteria that could sense when food was spoiling. They said, why are we trusting expiry dates? Why don't we actually look for food that's spoiling and the volatiles they put out? They figured this will save billions of tons of food,
cool.
annually from going to waste.
So one of the things I'm hearing you say is that when you let lots and lots of people work on these problems, they start finding interesting problems. I mean, the food expiration date probably doesn't strike any of us as a big problem. But you're right, it's a huge waste of food, isn't it?
Exactly. So much of it just gets discarded just because the date, says it's expired. Really, where things are going now is it's actually coming out of academia, and it's this type of biotechnology is coming into the community. This is a lab in Brooklyn called GenSpace, where it's a subscription model for about $100 a month. You're part of the lab, you can take courses, you can use the tools, and get to see some really awesome speakers come by as well.
So that's cool. So that's a little bit different from, in the opening comments, I talked about people who are building labs in their houses, in their dens, or their closets.
There's definitely a few people that have done it.
In a way, we're moving away from that now, where you can go join, it's like joining a hackerspace or a maker community.
It's more fun when you do it with a group anyway.
Sure, and you can get your questions answered, or somebody can show you how.
Exactly, and you don't have to worry about the FBI necessarily beating down your door. So, and the groups that are really getting good at this, well, they're using robots to do not just printing of DNA, but actually booting of the organism and testing. So this is allowing people to really have biotechnology done remotely.
Wow,
just
cool.
Send a design, they'll build and test.
That's a big one. So hang on, that means you could design an organism on your desktop computer, your laptop computer at Starbucks even, and then send it out to get not just printed or not just have the DNA compiled for you, but you could actually have the organism made, manufactured, produced? What verb do they use?
And the results come back to you, and you can decide whether you're going to.
So if you didn't get it right the first time, you can do it again.
Do it again.
Is this affordable, or is it really expensive?
It's expensive right now, but the prices come down really fast with these technologies.
So like all technology, the price keeps dropping.
Yeah, it drops by about half every, over some very short period of time.
Wow, cool. And are you seeing like a lot of take up with this?
Yeah, the field's really growing quickly.
Because we keep hearing about it.
And it's bottom up. Like we really started building very simple things when this technology becomes available, because you're actually writing genetic code base by base, letter by letter. And so the types of things people built first were things like viruses that are very, very tiny, just proof of concept. State of the art right now is doing things like bacteria. And only one bacterial genome has been completely synthesized and booted, but there'll be more. And right now, we're moving up into doing more complicated genomic structures. This is baker's yeast. It's just, the foundation of bread and
beer.
Beer is
Oh,
the
here
most,
it is.
beer is the most important part, because that's, some people believe that beer is the root of all civilization, and I think it's actually going to be the gateway to a lot of synthetic biology as well. In fact, one of the iGEM teams, one of my favorites.
Here are the German brewers.
I love this. These guys were at iGEM this year. They built 4 synthetic yeast. One of them was a flavor, one of them was a sweetener, one of them was a cancer drug, and my favorite was they put the biosynthetic pathway for caffeine into yeast. So caffeinated beer, and I love that
That's
idea.
great. So it's beer that brings you up and then brings you down.
Exactly.
Cool.
This
Right on.
isn't, again, this isn't old recombinant cut and splice genetic engineering. This is from the code up, every base pair controlled, and we're starting to be able to envision doing things with this, like, bringing back a woolly mammoth,
Yeah.
or as you said, perhaps even Neanderthals one day.
Well, it wasn't me. It was George Church at Harvard who said that
And
recently.
he's saying, the technology is starting to allow us to think about doing this type of stuff in the future, not necessarily advocating doing it.